Where were you when this tackle took place?
So, Dan, I was on the sideline near the end zone. And when the tackle took place, you mentioned it, the medical staffs for the two teams. That was what was most alarming to me, was the urgency with which they hit the field. And, we often see injuries on the field, but you don't see this kind of urgency from medical staffs. The way they ran to DeMar, the way they ripped open the medical equipment, the way they started working on him immediately. From my vantage point, I could see them doing chest compressions. And at that point, that's when you started to see the teams gather around him and you started to lose your vantage point to that. But they also administered an AED. They shocked him twice on the field. You talked about the process the NFL has and having AEDs on the field there. And that was part of the process they used. But what was striking to me was the reaction from the players. And look, whenever we see someone with a head injury or a spinal injury in the NFL, and that's part of the game, we understand that. We wait for some kind of positivity from the player or the players around them, maybe a thumbs up. We're all waiting for that kind of moment. When you saw players turn away and cover their face with their jerseys or cover their face with their hands, you knew right then this was different and something we had never experienced before.
Yeah, I'd mentioned that. Having been on the sidelines for a variety of things, I usually look at the players. The players will tell you if a player is seriously hurt. And that's when I knew that, this was really, really serious.
Tyler Minshew bobbles it and is drilled at the goal line.
And this is what a nail as Jonathan Bostic
From the 30-yard line. And the slant is caught. Williams thought he had it, then a tremendous hit by Deshaun Goldson.
3rd and 7, over the middle. Polamalu got a hand on it.
and Ryan Clark laid out Wes Welker.
Protection. Brady's receiver gets walloped. It's Barner.
Curley gets sandwiched and he loses a helmet.
Helmet contact.
Off the play fake, over the middle, and then the ball is intercepted as it was McCourty who comes up with it.
And gain confidence, and the Bengals are allowing that to happen.
Oh, Watson gets smashed by Geno Atkins. And that'll...
Fitzpatrick, deep right side. Oh, man. Flag. I thought we might see one.
Steelers backing off, playing zone. What a hit dislodging the ball.
In a formation.
Grant from his own 35, he lost it, took a big shot, picked up by Igbeagane, and he is then hit hard.
His eyes off it looked like 2nd down and 2. Fitzpatrick. No gain. It's Strickland who comes up.
That was some unique look to Jets.
Hodges looking for Samuels, one-handed catch. He had his helmet knocked off by Hicks, and he still held on.
Booker is, wow, was he walloped?
He gets hit by a freight train.
Wow.
In motion. The rush 3, Palmer. Shipley, we're going to have a flag.
Good protection. Vaughn. Incomplete. Big hit, but it looked plain to me.
Shot in the pocket. And now he throws at the last second and completed it as he got planted. And I mean planted. And he's down.
Reeves swings it out to Luke. The ball is knocked away, and an incomplete pass. And a crunching hit put on by Sheldon.
The middle screen to Adams. Ooh, he got popped in the face.
Oh, my
mouth guard comes out, and they're asking for help right away.
Jim, oh no.
And Kaepernick wide open and making the catch. And what a shot. Flag is thrown. In fact,
When did you start to get a sense of what was going to happen with the game itself?
Once they told the teams to go inside, and they had not yet postponed it, at that point they had suspended it, you could see the reaction from the players that this was not a team equipped emotionally to go back on a field and play a football game within a few minutes. And to kind of give you an idea what was happening, as the players walked back into the tunnel, Dan, towards their locker room, they could still see the ambulance that was waiting in the parking lot because they were waiting for DeMar's mother to make it down from the stands to ride with him to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, so they could still see the ambulance he was in at the end of the tunnel before it left. And you could just tell from the looks on the faces and the emotion from the players, they were not going to play this game. Within a matter of minutes, Zach Taylor, the Bengals head coach, came over to their locker room to meet with Sean McDermott. The referees were there, and we had a good clue then that there was no way they were playing this game at that point.
Did you have any idea that who was making this decision? Because there's conflicting reports of the teams were told you got 5 minutes. Joe Buck said this, I think, 4 times on the broadcast. The NFL, Troy Vincent said, no, that was not the case. I didn't know what role the coaches, the captains played in this. Can you sort any of that out for us?
As far as what the NFL and their involvement, I can't. I can tell you the referees, Zach Taylor, Sean McDermott, and members of the front office for the Buffalo Bills were outside of the Bills locker room discussing this pretty quickly after the announcement of the suspension of the game. So to me, that was a signal that they were there amongst each other talking about this. Sean McDermott didn't last long in that meeting. He was out there very briefly, and then he went back inside the locker room to be with his team. But Zach Taylor, other members of the Bengals coaching staff were there with the referees discussing, obviously, deciding to postpone this game. But as far as the NFL's involvement in it, from where I was and my vantage point, I don't know how much involvement they had at that point.
How much confusion was going on?
Not much, quite honestly, because there was, to me, the confusion was why was the ambulance still in the parking lot? Look, we had the player on the field for 9 minutes with the chest compressions and the AED and the players having to watch this. And a lot of times, Dan, you'll see guys go up to a player as they're leaving a field or being lifted into an ambulance or lifted up onto a stretcher, go up there and tap him and dap him up and make sure he's okay. And they know they have his support. Those guys were told to stay back. So that was different right there. But once they'd announced it, that the suspension of the game was going to happen, it was very organized. The guys went back into the locker room. Both teams stayed in their locker rooms for a long time. It wasn't until they announced the actual postponement of the game that we saw some of the Bengals players then make their way from the Bengals locker room down to the Bills locker room. That included team captains. That included Joe Burrow, who made his way to the Bills locker room. In fact, we saw Josh Allen then go to the Bengals locker room as well to meet with some of their players, because the Bills stayed in Cincinnati at Paycor Stadium for a long time. I mean, this happened in the 9 o'clock hour. They didn't leave. The buses didn't leave the stadium until 12:30. So those guys were there for a long time just to be around each other, to comfort each other in any way they could. And I think you see this fraternity of football players, right? Where, look, I'm sure there are Bengals players who played with him at some point, played against him or with him at some point in the pre-draft process. So I'm sure a lot of guys in the Bengals locker room knew him. Not only the Bills were feeling this, but the Bengals players as well.
Any sense of how many Buffalo Bills players went to the hospital?
No, I know Stephon Diggs was the one player that was the high-profile player that did go there. As far as outside of him, I don't know of other players that went to the hospital.
Any idea, or the Bengals have any idea of an update on what's going to happen with the possibility of playing this game, or how does it end?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something right now that I've been told by the team will be handled by the league at this point. Obviously, it's a very unique situation because we all understood, and that's the weird part about this, Dan, was this was supposed to be the showcase of everything that's going great right here in Cincinnati now. With this football team playing great football, the Bills being the team that the Bengals are competing with, trying to get that number 1 seed. So you have this joy and excitement of what's happening on Monday Night Football, and then this happens, and it's this emotional dichotomy of joy and excitement to sadness and curiosity of what's happening. But as far as what's going to happen with the game at this point, we have not been given any information from the Cincinnati Bengals what they're going to do with this game against the Bills.
Do you think the Bengals will show up for practice? Or it was Tuesday going to be an off day for them?
Tuesday's a dark day for the Bengals. They don't show up for practice today. There was no scheduled media availability today. They were supposed to be back in the building tomorrow for practice. For normal media availability, that will be released later today. If they're going to change that, what they're going to do, because look, we obviously all are curious and worried and hopeful for DeMar, but at some point we have to figure out what's going to happen with the rest of this football season, because there's a lot of stuff on the line here with the Bengals and the Bills and the Chiefs and the AFC and going forward. I don't know how these guys handle this emotionally. I'll share another anecdote with you, Dan. We were outside of the Bengals locker room. They moved all the media out of the tunnels and away from the locker room. There is a second exit from the Bengals locker room, and we could see Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. If you remember, he was involved with the play. He caught the pass. He was the guy that Hamlin was trying to tackle when he fell to the ground, popped up, and collapsed. And T's mom was there. And T's mom was waiting for him outside of the locker room. They shared an emotional moment, and he walked off. So again, it's not just the Bills dealing with this. That there are Bengals players who have never seen anything like this before, trying to deal with it as well.
Great job, Joe. Thank you.
What looked like a routine tackle. A warning to everyone at home: this video may be troubling to watch. Now, this happened just before 9 tonight in the first quarter in Cincinnati. Hamlin there making the tackle on Bengals receiver T. Higgins with 5:58 left in the quarter. Hamlin stands up. We're freezing before he collapses. An ambulance comes out on the field, and it was reported that CPR was administered for 9 minutes on the field. Players from both teams, visibly upset, players in tears, surrounded him, prayed on the field. He was taken to a local hospital in Cincinnati. The ambulance just before 9:30. The NFL later would announce he was in critical condition. The league initially delayed and postponed the game, and then around 10 p.m. suspended the game for the evening. Now, there is no word on what will happen next for the league. ESPN's sideline reporter Lisa Salter spoke about what the feeling was like at the stadium.
We've grown accustomed to it, seeing guys take hard hits, see them stay down for a little while, get back up, give the thumbs up, and that's all we were all hoping for. And when that didn't happen, I think this entire stadium was just devastated.
And you can see Lisa there visibly upset there. Hamlin's mother was reportedly with him as he was transported to the hospital. Once again, Damar Hamlin, 24-year-old Bill safety, is in critical condition. We'll bring you any updates as soon as we get them. Now, coming up later in sports, we'll hear from a Bengals fan that was at the stadium. We'll hear from him later.
With me now is Dr. Christopher Labos. He's an epidemiologist and a cardiologist. Doctor, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
So Hamlin suffered what doctors are calling a cardiac arrest. Can you explain what that is and how is it different from a heart attack?
Right. So a heart attack is when you have a blocked artery in your heart. Now, it can often lead to a cardiac arrest, but a heart attack is a blocked artery. What happened in this case, and we have to speculate a little bit. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it looks as if what happened to Hamlin was that he suffered an arrhythmia, so his heart stopped beating. And the question becomes, well, then what caused it? And it seems as if in this case, what probably happened is that he suffered commotio cordis. And what that is that when you get a blow to your chest, right over your breastbone, just over where your heart is, if you get that blow at exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, at exactly the right moment in the cardiac cycle, you can actually provoke an arrhythmia. And when you provoke an arrhythmia like ventricular fibrillation, essentially what happens is your heart stops beating. And when your heart stops beating, it stops pumping blood to the rest of your body. You have no pulse, you have no blood pressure. That's why somebody collapses and goes into cardiac arrest. So in this case, although we speculate, but looking at the footage, it looks as if the blow that he got to his chest when he made the tackle, just by a consequence of bad luck, was just enough to provoke this arrhythmia, which is why he went into cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated on the field.
So we're not talking, doctor, about some sort of underlying condition here.
No, well, now we have to speculate, but he wasn't known for any of that from what the news reports are telling us. So now when young athletes do collapse during sports, which does happen, sometimes they have an underlying condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, where the heart is thickened. That's a genetic problem that they were born with, and that puts them at risk for arrhythmia. Commotio cordis, if that's exactly what happened here, somebody has usually a structurally normal heart. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that blow happened at exactly the right place at exactly the right time in exactly the right window of the cardiac cycle when you're vulnerable for arrhythmia. So a bunch of different things have to happen wrong in quick succession. And you often see it in sports like this, where there is trauma. You talk about it in football. The prototypical example actually is in baseball. A pitcher who gets a baseball straight to the chest. That would be the type of trauma to the thoracic cage that could provoke an arrhythmia like this.
Doctors there on the field worked on Hamlin, I believe, for almost 10 minutes. During that time, Dr. Labos, were they trying to get the heart to start again? Was that their focus?
Yeah, so when somebody's in ventricular fibrillation, their heart is not beating. The way you fix that is you apply a defibrillator and you shock the heart back into normal rhythm. So a defibrillator is essentially what people see on TV, where the doctors take the paddles and give a shock to the heart and yell clear. That's what a defibrillator is. An automatic electronic defibrillator, an AED, which is what I believe they used here, just does all of that automatically. But it's essentially that. You need to provide an electrical shock to the heart to reset it into normal rhythm. The reason why the prognosis of commotio cordis has actually improved substantially over the past 30 years is largely due to the fact that these types of devices, these defibrillators, these AEDs, are now much more common than they once were. Without a defibrillator, you can't really reset the heart rhythm, and so the person who suffered commotio cordis is going to have essentially no blood flow to their brain for a long period of time. But if you can apply a defibrillator quickly, as seems to have been done in this case, you can actually restore the normal heart rhythm and minimize the amount of time when the person's brain is deprived of oxygen. So the quicker you can apply that defibrillator, the better the prognosis is. And that's why the prognosis for this condition has increased substantially over the past few years.
What are the chances of a full recovery?
So the quoted survival rate is 58%, and that's an improvement over what it was decades ago when it was far, far worse. It largely depends on a number of factors. The youth of the patient is obviously helpful. If you have no underlying medical problem, that's obviously helpful. But the biggest factor is how quickly the heart rhythm was reset. So if it was reset very quickly, as again appears to have been done in this case, the prognosis might actually be quite favorable. So that's what I think everybody's hoping for.
Dr. Labos, thank you so much. Dr. Labos is an epidemiologist and a cardiologist.